Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Jabbering Jake Podcast. It's been a couple weeks. I took a couple recordings off for the holidays because we just went through the holiday season. So for those of you who celebrate, hopefully you had good holidays. And for everyone else, congratulations on getting some time off work, if you did. Unless you work in retail, in which case, God bless you people, retail workers, first responders, anyone who is likely still going to be working, which is interesting because when I used to be on the fire department, pretty much without fail, and my dad will say the same thing, pretty much without fail, there's always something on Christmas, always some incident. I guess sometimes people just, screw up cooking the turkey or the roast beef or the ham or whatever you have at Christmas. We usually like to go with the roast beef. But, yeah, so it's been a couple weeks. I know it's not the first time I missed a couple weeks, but this time it was not this time it was deliberate. Like, yes, I'm going to take this time off, even though I should have mentioned it, perhaps. But sometime in the future, when I am a bit more consistent with this, I'll probably start to bank episodes ahead of time so that I can record them ahead and then still release these episodes each week for you without then having to record over the holidays. But if you're wondering where I was, or if you were... That's where I was. I was celebrating the holidays. I was traveling. If you weren't wondering because you just suspected I missed it again, well, here you go. Fun fact. But, yeah, so as I mentioned, I did some traveling over the holidays back up north to my origin location, story, spot, whatever you want to call it, back to my roots. And normally, I think pretty much every time up until now, I've always driven it. But this past time, I flew it with my brother. We both went up north. And it was kind of a last-minute decision. We were planning on driving for most of the time. Basically up until like the day of when we were supposed to leave driving. We kind of said, what if we fly instead? And of course, it was more expensive because flying on the holidays, it's going to be expensive, especially booking last minute. But it wasn't crazy in terms of like how much more expensive it was. It wasn't outrageous, but it definitely was worth it just to get some of the savings and time, because it really cuts that trip down. Or even if it's still somewhat close in travel time when you consider drives to and from airports, layovers, flights, stuff like that, it's time that you can use to do other things. Whereas when you're in a car, mostly if you're driving, you can't really do much other than drive. And that's a brutal drive for one or even two people, because it's a 22-hour drive. And I don't know if you've ever noticed before, but it is very difficult to stay up for that long, just driving. And when you have two people, especially two people that are on similar sleep schedules, it's going to kind of be hard to have one person rest and the other drive and then switch it off. You're both most likely still going to get tired at the same time. So having two people for that drive, actually, it is useful and it does help, but it's still tougher than you might think. But no, we flew this time, so even if it were the same amount of time, you could use all that time to sleep or do whatever, read a book, do your taxes, troll people on the internet. Whatever you want to do, really. The possibilities are endless, except they're not because of all the security. So we flew up north, spent some time with people, with family and friends up north. And interestingly, it was not a direct flight to where we were going. We had to take a connecting flight out of D.C. And we got to D.C., and good Lord, so many people's flights were delayed or canceled. I mean, hundreds or thousands of people. I was hearing stories of people, overhearing people talking about getting stranded in the city for a night. Or this guy I talked to on the second flight actually was saying how he spent the night in an airport, which I don't think I've ever done. I think I've been through airports at night, but I've never been stuck there overnight. It must be so weird because, well, it's been weird going to some airports during the sort of tail end of the pandemic because they still weren't back in full force. And it's weird seeing a big airport so dead. I think I had flown out of the Montreal airport at one point, sort of still during the tail end of it. And it's a big airport, and it was practically dead. I mean, it was such a surreal feeling. If I flew out of Burlington Airport in Vermont and it's not that busy, that's not too crazy because it's a very small airport. But, what point was I getting at? Yeah. So if you're staying there overnight, it must be weird because I don't know if, in terms of people there waiting for flights, it is less busy, but everything's shut down pretty much. A lot of stuff is closed, except for, I guess, essential services and TSA and stuff like that. But we lucked out. Our flights never got delayed nor canceled on the way up north. So they were definitely turbulent. There were some turbulent flights and landings, but our stuff never got delayed or canceled due to the storm that was kind of working its way up the East Coast. Which, interestingly, on the day we had left, it was colder in Alabama, where we were that morning, than it was in Vermont, which is crazy to think about. Obviously it happens from time to time because of weather phenomena such as that, but we're not used to it actually being colder down here than up there. And of course that quickly changed as the storm moved up the coast. But we definitely wanted to see some snow. We don't really see much snow here in the winter. And to help us get in the Christmas spirit, we figured some snow would help with that. But on our principal stop there in Massachusetts, there was still no snow. But luckily, we did take a ride up to Vermont during a leg of our journey. And we did get to see some snow there. And even then, it was still rather thin on snow in a lot of places. But we went and picked up one of my friends to go play D&D, or to hang out with our D&D group. Actually, it was Tom we were going to pick up, who was on the podcast recently, and without disclosing his approximate, without disclosing his location and doxing him, he lives out in the middle of the woods basically, and that was pretty much the one true winter wonderland we saw going up there, where you actually had an indication that it was winter and not just maybe spring or early fall. So we did get to see our snow, we did get to see our winter wonderland, and our Christmas spirit was saved. But I'll tell you what, my brother and I have been going to the gym. We've been working on our fitness and our health and losing weight and putting on some muscle. And we've been doing a great job, but especially my brother. He's lost over 60 pounds since we started. I haven't lost quite as much. I could have lost more. I got to hone in on the discipline with eating. But I've lost a decent amount of weight myself too. But we both gained a lot of weight back over the holidays. The backslide was incredible between all the cookies and cheesecakes and like pies and other types of cakes and big like meals with family. We definitely backslid quite a bit, which honestly is fine if you're spending time with family and you're celebrating the holidays at the end of the year and you're eating indulgent meals that we're very fortunate for those of us who are able to do so and put on those extra pounds. It's okay. Enjoy that time and appreciate it and be grateful for it. And then just for the following weeks, just go on a diet of only breathing air that's adjacent to food for the next couple weeks until you kind of bounce back. And that's kind of the phase we're in right now. We're off the tail end of the holidays. We're nearly free of all the sweets and treats that, at least for me, the sweets and treats was definitely probably the Achilles heel. Mostly free of those now and going back to drinking water and taking in the universe energy or something to nourish our bodies. And that pretty much describes the bulk of what I want to share about the holidays. Oh, but still on the travel. So I mentioned on the way there our flights weren't delayed or canceled, but on the way back down south, our first flight was delayed. And interestingly enough, this is a situation that has happened to me before. When I was coming back from India, and I went on a trip there, my first flight out of India got delayed, which in that case caused me to miss my connecting flight. And that's a whole story in its own that includes our group sprinting across the terminals of Heathrow Airport in London to catch our new connection that the airlines found for us. And I can only imagine what a sight that must have been to watch a bunch of people sprinting across one of the largest airports in the world. But in this case, our first flight was delayed. But it was not delayed so much that we missed our connecting flight, but it was close. The airport we landed in, Charlotte in North Carolina, is a pretty decently large airport. And our gate that we had to get to for our connecting flight was a decent walk away. It was like a 15, according to the signage, it was about a 15 or 18 minute walk. And we're getting there. They're pretty much, I think, starting the boarding process or something like that. And we didn't have to sprint across the airport, but we had to briskly walk and not dilly-dally to get from one gate to the other to our flight. And we made it. Just barely. They were boarding the last group onto the plane. There were only a handful of people left. So we cut it close. But we made it on the plane. And here's the best part. On the way back, for whatever reason, we weren't assigned seats when we printed out our initial boarding passes. We hadn't picked seats because it costs extra money, and who cares, honestly. You're going to get a seat on the airplane unless you're, flying United, and they're going to brawl you to get you off the plane. But it's kind of normal, actually, for airlines to overbook, which is why a situation like that arose. But we had seats. But on the way back, we weren't assigned seats. When we printed out our boarding passes, we got them at the gate. And on this flight that we just barely made, our connecting flight, we lucked out and got exit row seats on the plane. Now, what that basically means is because you have a seat in an exit row, well, that row is going to be used for people to exit the plane in case of an emergency or you need to evacuate, which means you don't want tiny narrow-ass little corridor for people trying to exit. You want it to be nice and wide so they have room to get out comfortably and quickly. All that to say, you get more legroom. You basically get a nice economy plus sort of legroom or whatever in those seats. With the caveat being that since you're sitting there, you have to assist in people getting off, which, whatever, fine. No big deal. You think I'm not going to help people, you know? And the thing is, right, that only applies if something happens, which most of the time with planes, it never does. I've been in at least 2 car crashes in my life that I can remember. Never been in a plane crash. Mind you, I've been in a lot more cars than planes, but the point is you think about all the planes. Anyway, we're getting off topic with that. But we lucked out. We got exit row seats. Of course, the plane didn't crash. Didn't have to help anyone exit. And we were living like kings with our extra legroom because my brother and I are tall dudes. We get back to our airport, and this is kind of an interesting thing that I was like, wow, that's okay. I get a text from Expedia that I booked our flights through, and it was a text saying, oops, sorry, one of your bags was delayed. We initially had brought only carry-on bags, but as we were checking into our flights, you know, it said, hey, you can check one of your carry-on bags for free. Or we got a free checked bag or something like that. So we checked our carry-ons, put them under the plane, which is why they had the possibility for this to happen. I get a text from Expedia saying, one of your bags has been delayed, but will make it to your destination at a later time. And I'm like, okay. At first I was like, why one bag and not the other? Weird, but okay. Whatever. Well, it turns out it did end up being both of our bags. Both of our bags got delayed, which my theory is that even though we made it to our connecting flight in Charlotte, our bags didn't. You know, because by the time they got all the luggage off that first plane and tried to get it over there, they'd already closed the luggage compartment. They had a bunch of different planes that they had to put the luggage on. Whatever. The point is, I think what happened, our baggage didn't make it to the plane. We did. So it was put on a later flight. So we went and, you know, got the claims started and stuff like that and make sure that our bags would get delivered. And sure enough, like the next day or 2 days later, they were delivered. But for my brother, it got even better because he was going through the pockets. And when we were up north, we got some gifts from people. And that included gift cards and cash, because who doesn't, you know, who couldn't use gift cards and cash? I mean, if you don't know what to get someone for Christmas, that's the perfect thing to do, because then they can use it for whatever they want. But my brother had $200 in cash, and I'm gonna be honest, my brother is a bit of a weirdo about things like this sometimes. He does unusual things. Unusual in my opinion anyway, most of the time. He kept that $200 in a pocket in his luggage there. Now me, I would normally keep that stuff on my person. I would never trust it in a carry-on bag or a checked bag or whatever. Any bag that I'm not with, you know, I'd have it in a pocket or something on my person. But he'd put it in there, and we got our bags, and he was going through and emptying everything out. And lo and behold, his $200 was missing from the pouch. And it was a zippered pouch, a pretty tight, secure pouch. It's not like it was something that could have fallen out, you know. So it would have had to be rifled through and had the $200 stolen. Which, interestingly, the gift cards weren't missing. So I mean, I think the jury's kind of still out on that one. You know, maybe he'll see that he actually shipped those $200 up in a box that we shipped back up north. But his $200 was missing. The $200 they kept in his pocket. So that's fun. So there's we're filing a claim for that now, and hopefully we'll get to the bottom of it. And he did learn a lesson from it. Not sure the lesson or conclusion of that lesson is the correct one that I would have gathered from it, but because his lesson that he learned was, well, just never carrying cash, never accepting cash again. If somebody wants to give me cash for Christmas, I'm gonna say just keep it. I'm like, so you're gonna miss out on getting that stuff just because of that? He's like, yep. He's like, I don't keep cash on me for that very reason. I'm like, but bro, the cash wasn't on you, and that's why it happened. That's why I keep cash on me. But it is what it is. Hopefully we find it or get it back. Well, let's be honest. That's not a very interesting story, I guess. Hopefully he gets it back somehow. But we made it back safe and sound. We had our Christmas here on New Year's and stuff like that. And it's 2023 now. And everybody's making their New Year's resolutions and stuff like that. And it's kind of funny. Recently, in the last couple of years, I kind of started to not be so crazy about New Year's resolutions. Wasn't really something that I kind of went along with. Not that I think New Year's resolutions are bad. Let me sort of explain that, because I think people making New Year's resolutions is great, especially if they genuinely mean them and they want to stick to them. For me, it's something like I constantly want to make resolutions to or goals. We'll call them goals that I want to achieve and set, sometimes shorter time, deadlines on them, longer deadlines. But the thing for me was just I never quite could get on board with we're waiting until the new year, or we're using the new year as, okay, now's the time to do it. And I'm not saying that's what most people do, but I don't know. Maybe it's just me being a contrarian and not wanting to hop on a bandwagon. But I just felt like forcing it to be timed on it's the new year now, so it's time for resolution. And a lot of them tend to be vague and not very specific and hard to track whether you achieved them. That could be a whole discussion on goals and being able to measure quantitatively if you reach them and put a deadline on them and stuff. But that's all boring. Well, maybe not boring, but that's all sort of nerdy statistical or philosophical stuff that maybe we could talk about in another podcast. But I think it is good to have the goals. And I did sort of make a goal, because I'd been asked what my New Year's resolution was, and rather than be the guy that's fun at parties that says, well, actually, I don't, I was just like, if you know me, I'm a software developer, and I'm interested in game development as one area of my interest, and I kind of have been wanting to do that in my spare time. It's just making games as a hobby or whatever. But it's sort of a dream that I've been stalling on and not really putting much time into. I just get so wrapped up in other stuff, other responsibilities that it's not that they're not actual responsibilities. They are, things like taking care of the animals, or keeping the house clean, or, helping people with stuff. But it's stuff that I could be making a better effort working in what I like to sort of phrase as like constructive hobbies, or things that improve me as a person. I could just sit and watch TV in my downtime for the rest of my life, which is perfectly fine if that's what you're content to do in life, but it's not what I want to do. And so I need to work in these constructive hobbies better. Things like voice acting, which I've talked about, in game development and stuff like that. So I basically made a goal that this year I want to actually make a game and publish it somewhere. It's not like necessarily going to be something that's like, oh yeah, you make a game and publish it and it makes tons of money. It's not going to be that. It's not going to be that. It's just, well, I won't be pessimistic, right? I'm going to try. It's probably not going to be something like that, but just the act of getting something out there is going to push me to improve. So that's what I said. I want to make and publish a game this year, and that'll be my resolution. And speaking of resolutions, speaking of the holidays, stuff like that, I noticed when I was uploading some of the recent episodes that Q&As are back on Spotify. So I thought, now that they seem to be up and running again, not that I'd ever use them, but I was going to use them, and then it seemed they disappeared. I think this is a good opportunity, right? Top of the new year, sort of close, and sort of entering hopefully a new chapter for everyone's lives and for this podcast. I think I'm going to add a Q&A for this, that if you're on Spotify, you can participate. If you're on the other platforms, leave a comment. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment, because I would love to hear or read for this Q&A. I'll have to look into if it can be a two-parter, but you'll see what the question is. But one is, what was your favorite memory from these holidays? If you celebrate holidays, or if you didn't, you can still give what your favorite memory over this time was. So that'll be the first question. And the second question will be, what are your New Year's resolutions, if you have them? And again, you can have any type of goal or dream you want. It doesn't necessarily have to be a New Year's resolution. Maybe it's something you resolved yourself to do earlier in 2022, and it's still ongoing. But that, for the sake of simplicity, those are going to be the two questions. First question, what was your favorite memory over the holiday season? Again, phrased the way it is for simplicity. You can sort of give a more abstract or nuanced answer within what makes sense for the question. And second question, what is your New Year's resolution? Again, phrased that way for simplification. And wow, I have a tendency to over-explain, but repeating for a third time. Question 1, what was your favorite memory from the holiday season? Question 2, what is your New Year's resolution? And of course, if you're commenting on other platforms, you'll definitely be able to answer those two questions, even if there's, on the Q&As on Spotify, there's only the potential for one question, but I'm pretty sure I can add more than one. So if you'd like to participate, I encourage it. I look forward to hopefully seeing responses from all of you listening, and maybe we'll even read them off on a future episode, because I think it would be really cool to share those. And it's a good opportunity for everyone to get to have some input onto the podcast, not just the patrons on the Patreon. So if you'd like to take the time on this episode, go into the Q&As, go into the comments section of this episode, and share your thoughts with us. Answer the questions if you'd like, and I'll get to share them with everyone else on a coming episode. I also am going to start doing more guest episodes. Hopefully, I've talked to some people, and I want to get them into episodes, because after that guest episode with Tom, which was really fun, I definitely want to do more episodes with him as well. But we're going to start, a new year and a new chapter for the podcast. We're really going to keep moving it forward, and I want to make this better, make it the best product that it can be, because, that's just, when I undertake something, I want to try and make sure that I do the best I can, which a little reference back to an earlier episode, a little funny aside, I did with my Christmas lights. I finally had decorated, and, not to toot my own horn a little bit, but they went from being like, wow, this guy doesn't care, to, wow, these are some of the best lights in the neighborhood. But anyway, we're coming up to the end of this episode, so thank you all again for listening, for watching, even though it's still just sort of listening if you're watching it on YouTube. Thank you for being there to support the show as we go through another new year with tons of possibilities for this podcast that I'm just so excited about. It means a lot that you all have supported. If you enjoy it, or if you hate it, share it with your friends, enemies, pets, neighbors, strangers. Share the podcast around. That's one of the best ways to support the podcast. Or you could go support the sponsor, Anchor, as you've heard in the ads. It's a great way to start your own podcast, because these days everyone's got a podcast. They start handing out podcast microphones with birth certificates, I think. So support the sponsors. Tell everyone about the podcast, or if you want to, or maybe I could say subscribe to the Patreon if you haven't, for some exclusive rewards that help the show. But until next time, thank you everyone for supporting the podcast. I guess I'm getting a phone call now. Sorry about that. But thanks for listening. And until next time, bye.